repeating the same story.
So we're starting at the first pasuk in this week's parasha. And just before we begin, there's a famous klal in the great Poiskim, how do you call them, the great lawgivers, that we always read both in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. We always read the parasha Bemiidbar before Chag HaShavuos. There can be sometimes maybe a very big Yaitzim and a Klal can also read Parashat Nosai before the actual Chag, but usually the one that is right alongside Shavuos, but is always just before Shavuos, is Bemiidbar, is Parashat Bemiidbar. So that would tend to indicate that even though that's based on a Tosfos in a certain place in Masechta Megillah, where Tosfos says that the real preceder to Matan Torah, Parashat B'Chol because Parashat B'Chol has in itself the Teicha that we learned. We had last week the what do you call it, the retributions and the what you might call, for lack of a better word, the curses and so on.
Blessings. Blessings.
Yes, and they have to be read before Shavuos, because the Gemara says that Shavuos is like a Rosh Hashanah. It's like a whole new start. And just before Rosh Hashanah, we read a big teicha in Parashat Kisavos. Also, there's a teicha prior to Shavuos. You know that people should do tshuva and prepare themselves, etc. And Tosfos writes over there that because of that, we always read Bemiidbar to interrupt between B'Chol Kesai and Chag HaShavuos. We don't want the teicha coming right after. We don't want the Chag coming right after the teicha. So therefore, we always put in Parashat Bemiidbar. That's what Tosfos says. However, the very fact that that becomes a klal in the Torah, and always we read Parashat Bemiidbar before Shavuos, well, that would indicate that Bemiidbar, the Pnimius, and the Fiddle in Pashtas has a connection with the whole meaning of Matan Torah, which we celebrate on Chag HaShavuos. So we need to examine and find out what is that essential precedence always of Bemiidbar prior to Matan Torah, and what does it come to teach us? Before we begin that, I'd just like to begin with a famous pisgam that he called a famous remark of the Baal Shem Tov. And you guys are familiar with the famous nigun. Well, it's a pasuk in Tehillim, but it's a famous Chabad nigun, and the Rebbe used to sing it on certain occasions, and it caused a tremendous arousal by the whole public, and that is Tomer L'cho Nafshi, the pasuk in Kapitel Samim Beis in Tehillim, and we say Tomer L'cho Nafshi, Tomer L'cho B'sori, Be'eretz Tzio V'oyev B'li Moim, that my soul was thirsted for you, and my flesh is literally longed and had unbelievable yearnings for you in a land which is thirsty and how do you call it, dried up without water. But that's parashas referring to a midbar. And then it says, Kain ba'kodesh chazisicha lirois oischo, etc. So the word Kain ba'kodesh chazisicha means in a similar way, even when I'm in a holy place and not in a midbar, I should be able to see you and long for you, like I did when I was in the thirsty and dry place of the desert. So the Baal Shem Tov he said that you shouldn't be mafarish the word Cain. I should similarly long for you when I'm in a holy place. But he said halavai. The word Cain means halavai. Would it be? They say Hashem should know very much that when I'm in a holy place, I should long for you like I did when I was in the
desert.
When I was in the desert. In other words, halavai, that I should have the same longings for Hashem when I'm in a holy place, in an ordered place, than what I had when I was in the desert. And that's been applied on many occasions to many great people who've been in certain demands in their life where they gave themselves to Mesiras Nefesh because they were in very, very difficult situations, and they devoted themselves to Yiddishkeit beyond reasoning, beyond Tam V'Dav. And then when they came to, the freer countries where everything's more, comfort and laid on, and everything, they felt that they had a big yerida, and they became very, very palabatish. They became sort of very much absorbed in that. Therefore, they used to say, Cain b'kodesh, halavai b'kodesh. Once I've got into what you might call the place where I can go into a shul and a base of medrash without any problems. Halavai, I should have the same longing for Hashem in that situation that I did when I was in the Bemiidbar. You follow? In other words, I'm sure all of you are forming in your mind the picture of the Yidden from Russia. Well, I notice everybody sort of taking that very Balabatish, but I remember when I was, the first few times I went to the Rebbe, a lot of the big Siddim came out of Russia at that time. They got out of Russia to America and to Israel, and shortly after their arrival, they began to complain to the Rebbe that they feel a tremendous yerida, that when they were in Russia, and it was a place where there was no chance to keep Yiddishkeit, and it was a desert, an absolute desert when they get to Yiddishkeit, so they were aroused in Mesiras Nefesh, and they were really into keeping their Yiddishkeit without any limitations, without any holdbacks, and even from, how do you call it, ad bli dai v'ad Mesiras Nefesh. But when they came to the Arotzos, where everything's okay, and where a shul is very available, and where a base of medrash, and even to bring up your children in the way of Yiddishkeit is very available, so then they felt a yerida. Well, that would tend to indicate that there's something in the Sinyan of being in a desert. When you're in a desert, both in Ruchnias and in Gashmias, you feel a certain, nearness and a desire to give yourself away to Hashem. Then you're doing everything sort of fine, everything's going along in a way, and that's what the Baal Shem Tov said, Cain, b'kodesh, halavai. Halavai, that when I'm in the holy place, I should be able to feel for Hashem the way I did when I was in the Bemiidbar. And that's why when the Rebbe used to sing that song, people used to get really Messiah, Cain b'kodesh, chazisicha. You can hear that longing of the Baal Shem Tov's words in the words and in the notes of the niggun. Can't you? It's, is that wiping the sleep out of the eyes, or what?
Does that mean it's a Baal Shem Tov niggun?
Does
that mean it's a Baal Shem Tov niggun? Does that mean it's a Baal Shem Tov niggun?
I don't think the niggun was made up by the Baal Shem Tov.
Right.
I doubt it. But it's a Chabadske niggun, but the purest that I gave is the purest of the Baal Shem Tov. Halavai, how much Hashem should grant that I should be able to be in the holy place like I was when I was out there. Okay, so on that basis, and with bearing that in mind, which I hope you will, won't you? It's, we're going to approach first pasuk in the parashah. You have it there? Very good. And it says like this: Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, that Hashem spoke to Moshe Bemiidbar Sinai. This was in the desert of Sinai. Bo'er Moed be'erod lachodesh hasheni, b'shona hasheni is l'teiso me'eretz Mitzrayim le'moed. That Hashem spoke to Moshe in the desert of Sinai. Now it's very interesting that we have like three types of Sinais. We have Har Sinai, we have Desert Sinai, and we have Stam Sinai. We have Sinai without either. There, for example, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos begins at Moshe Kibel Torah Mi Sinai. And in most places in the Torah it's written that it was in Har Sinai, and here it's written that they came into Midbar Sinai. In other words, that there's a desert connected with Sinai. And Moshe said to the Yidden what is about to be told. He said that to them in the Oyel Moed, what that's the sanctuary, on the Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the first day of the second month, B'shona Hasheni, in the second year after they're going out from Egypt. What's well known, but that's just shortly after the sanctuary was put up. The sanctuary was put up in Rosh Chodesh Nisan of the second year that they left Mitzrayim. And Rashi brings down that this minyan was Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is immediately following the completion of the putting up of the Mishkan. And because Hashem wanted to give the Shekhinah permanently in the Mishkan, therefore he wanted to count all the Yidden to see exactly how many they were. And Rashi says that because of their dearness and their affection that Hashem has for Yidden, and therefore he kept counting them. As something that you really value, you keep counting it, and by counting it, it gains an extra excitement and affection in your eyes. But therefore we see someone that he's a bit crazy about his money. He's always counting it. He's always counting the money that he has to make sure that it's all okay and that everything's all right, because of the dearness that it has and what you might call the importance that it has in his eye. So you might ask the question, but the way I see the sort of form that everybody's in at the moment, I don't know if you're going to ask the question, but you might ask the question, why would Hashem count him before he brought the Shekhinah down into the Oyel Moed, even Kavua? Rashi says that was the time that he counted them here. Now some people learn otherwise, that he was counting them because they wanted to have a permanent army. It talks about people who are Yotzei Tzova, those who are going out into the possible wars. Remember, they want to have a firm and fixed army, so it's more like a military size-up of the whole situation. But even should there be a possibility of war, etc. But Rashi Al-Kapon doesn't learn that way. He learns was accounting because Hashem was going to give his Shekhinah in the Oyel Moed, Bo'evim Kavua. So what's got to do with counting? Why would you count at that moment that you're going to sort of, if you're the Eibishter, and you're going to dwell amongst the Yidden in the Oyel Moed, why would you count them all of a sudden? So we could suggest that the Rebbe brings it down in several of the Sikhas, that if you count something, like we just mentioned, you show how it's got a chavivas and a dearness in your eyes, but once you've counted it, you give it a certain importance or state in your interrelationship with that thing, that it now becomes what's called a counted thing. And it's called in the Gemara and also brought down in Shulchan Aruch, Yoredeya, that something which has been counted, especially because you wanted to know exactly how many of it you have, and that meaning is important to you, then that can never become botav. Ador shebeminyan loi batel. In other words, you've heard of the din of certain forbidden materials. If they fall into a mixture, they can become, how do you call it, batel. They can become completely cancelled. In the mixture, for example, we have a mixture of echad b'shishim. If something is echad b'shishim, it's 1 against 60, then we consider it being batel, 60. You know? Then we consider it as having no matiyas, and even though the dover ha'isa is there, if there's 60 times against the dover ha'isa, then you can eat that whole mixture. Even though you're eating inside there, we can't see it. If you can see it, you're not allowed to do that. If you can see it, you're supposed to pull it out. You can't just rely on it. But if it's all become mixed together and you can't identify it, then you can eat it, the whole lot. Why? Because we say it's batel. Yeah, there's a heavy ratio of 60 to 1, but that's considered as not having any ability to give time. It won't give any taste. However, the Gemara says, and the Shulchan Aruch brings down, that if you counted that thing and you made it a dover shebeminyan because of its significant importance to you, and it's really dear and important to you, and that dropped in, got all mixed up in a mixture, then that doesn't become bottle. But because it was important enough for you to count it, and it becomes part of what's called a counted number, then it doesn't become bottle. No matter how much you put, it won't be considered bottle. Why? Because a dover shebeminyan ain't a bottle. So one of the explanations of that is that because it's very important, yeah, and you counted it, that's a sign of how important it is to you, then it gains what we call a chashivas, how do you call it, an important state, and it can never become cancelled out, it can never become bottom. So therefore the Rebbe suggests that the reason why before Hashem came down to give his Shechina permanently in the Mishkan, yeah, he counted the Yidden in such a way that the Yidden become a dover shebeminyan. They're a counted thing. You know, it's not, in some ways it's not good to count people, you know that. Rashi brings it in parashas Kisisa, and he also mentions that here that if you count people, then you bring what's called a possibility of ayin hara, of the evil eye, and that can be very damaging. And therefore over there Rashi says that they each gave a half a shekel, and he counted the shekels, he didn't actually count the people. And therefore also Rashi learns here that they also gave a half a shekel, and he counted the shkolim, but not the people. Because to count the people by head is not good. It's even a dangerous thing. And therefore you've noticed when you count for a minyan, when you count in the shul, you're trying to work out if there's a minyan in the shul, how do you count people?
We don't.
Yeah, you say not 1, not 2, not 3. Or you take a posik that's got 10 words in it, and you see if there are 10 people by counting each person as a word in the posik. For example, Shiur Samecha, Uvorechas Nachlasecha, Urain Vanase, Mahadoelam has got exactly 10 words. And so people count in those, they say, Shiur Samecha, Uvorechas Nachlasecha, Urain Vanase, Ad. Yeah, and if you're missing Ha'olam, you know you're missing one person, 2 people. You don't count the people. Why? Because you never count people because it's a chashash of bringing evil eye. You follow? So here it's a whole question, why didn't Moshe count them and wasn't? So Rashi avoids the problem by saying they gave here a half a shekel also. I don't want to go into the whole reason why, it's a big discussion. Others want to say that they already gave the half a shekel earlier, and here he counted their names. Therefore it's written that they all had to give their names, and in effect what he did was he counted their name. However, we see that it's mentioned clearly in the Torah that this counting of the Yidden was done in the Midbar Sinai. And then he says in the next passage, Se'u es reish kol adas b'nei Yisrael l'mishpacha l'beis avisom. He said, you must elevate the head of the whole of the congregation of the Jewish people according to their families, according to the base avisom, according to, because there are a lot of tribes by Eden, 12 tribes, so it could be that the father was from one tribe and the mother maybe from another. It was only one generation was forbidden to do that, or maybe there's slight mixtures. So you count them according to the family as it's in a shevet according to the father. So we see that the Torah wants to say count, and what does it say? It says elevate the head. Elevate the head. Se'u es reish kol adas b'nei Yisrael. Taking down at okay, so we see then that the counting of Yidden is referred as elevating their heads. So once again, there are many ways in Lashon Kodesh that you could say count people. You could say tispor otam, you could say manei otam. There's different words that you could say to count. Why, when Hashem wants to tell Moshe that he must count the Yidden, he says elevate their heads. So ask yourself the question, what does it mean that you're being counted? In order that the Shekhinah should be able to come and dwell permanently in the Mishkan, you're being counted, and that's called that your head is you're being elevated. Now it's just of some interest that the Ramban, in his Pirush al Torah, he brings down a very interesting thing. And he says that in the old days when they had an executor, that he used to take people's heads off, one in a time. Well, I see I don't sort of get any particular interest, but the Ramban says that they used to say to the executor, lift up the head of Klali. Yeah, elevate the head of Klali. And if you look in the Torah, you remember there was by Paro in Yosef's time, there was Asar Ha'oifim and Asar Ha'amashi, remember? And the Yosef met up with him in the prison. Yeah, they called the minister of bakers and the minister of drinks, wines and drinks, all that sort of thing. So the Sar Mashkim, he had a dream, but it was okay. It came out good. And Pari brought him back, gave him back to his job. The Sar Yosef foretold that. However, the Sar Ha'oifim, Yosef said, it's not good with you. In another few days, Paro's going to hang you. That's what Yosef told him, and that's what in effect happened. And it's written over there that he lifted up his head, that Paro, he lifted up the head of the Sar Ha'oifim. In other words, he hung. So we see that executing somebody through the head, and this is what the Ramban brings. He says that executing somebody through the head can be called to lift up the head. So, what's that got to do here? If we want to count the Yidden, why would we use an expression which has a very sharp and almost, it causes a certain, shudder on the person, the idea of lifting up the head. And we find that in Pasha Kisiso, it's also that expression, way back in Shmois, when we're told about the minion over there, it also says, Kisiso es reish b'nei Yisrael. When you will elevate the head of the Jewish people. So ask yourself the question, why is it that when we want to make this count, which is tremendously key, as we said, it has a tremendous key relationship to the whole preparation for Matan Torah, why do we use the expression elevate the head when that has a certain, you had to call it ring of literally taking the person into another world, taking his head away, as it were, betrayal. So, and the Ramban brings that down. Now the interesting thing is some people want to take it out of the Ramban. And they say it's a little bit sort of, severe and slightly unpleasant in the Ramban. Maybe he didn't really write that, or maybe he didn't really mean it. And therefore they want to sort of suggest that maybe that's not there. But in most of the printings that print the Ramban originally, they bring it. And that little piece is here there in the Ramban. And who actually counted the Yidden was Moshe v'Aaron. Elabes Arison, Bemiidbar Shemois, that's what some people say gets rid of the iron horn. And Kol Zachor L'Gugel Itzom, every male, according to their, their head bone, the top of their head. Also an interesting expression, that you count the tops of the heads. And then he says that they have to be 20 years old and everything. And then it says at the end, Ata v'Aaron. There has to be you, Moshe, and Aaron. You have to be there, and you have to take care of the counting. Now Moshe Rabbeinu was a general leader. How would you describe Moshe Rabbeinu?
Leader.
A
leader.
A general leader. But how would you describe Moshe Rabbeinu?
A leader.
Very good. But it's brought down that Moshe Rabbeinu had the authorities and the leadership of a king. And later in Sefer Dvorim, I don't want to go into all now, he's actually called a king. All the Chalapochas, he was a Nasi. What a Nasi means, like how they call a princely leader. He was either a Nasi or he was a Miller. So Moshe Rabbeinu had a tremendous amount of what to do. Just like the Rebbe, you could never find a moment when the Rebbe wasn't busy. The Rebbe was always, and yet the Rebbe found time for everybody and for everything. That's another. So when he got a relatively, what would seem to be technical task, like counting people, I give that to, take a few officers, a few high guys, that they're responsible, give them paper and everything, and they'll count all the people for them. They'll make what's called how do they call it nowadays, a census. They'll make for you the census, and then they'll bring all the results to Moshe Rabbeinu. And here it's written that Moshe and Aaron, they had to be there. So what does anybody say about that? Why would Moshe or Aaron, they have to be there while all the tribes go past and count all the people? 600,000 plus people. That's a lot of people. And it's more than what was in Miron on Lag Ba'im, mentioned the whole 24 hours. There was 500,000 people. You had 600,000. And they're all flowing past and being counted. So that means that Moshe and Aaron had to stand a long time and be there when the people are going past. So anybody got any ideas? Why would the pasuk says you and Aaron have to be there? So there's right near the beginning of this pasha, there's a very interesting remark made by the Ramban. Once again, the Ramban. And the Chabadniks who've seen the Ramban, they call it a Chassidish Ramban. Well, at least somebody's smart. They call it a Chassidish Ramban. Now, why do they call it a Chassidish Ramban? So the Ramban says also, he asks that question, why does Moshe and Aaron have to stand there? All the people following past. So it couldn't help it. Moshe and Aaron must have seen everybody as they came past. So the Ramban says that there's certain times when you have to file past, and Moshe Rabbeinu has to look at you. The Ramban. And he said the very fact that Moshe Rabbeinu will look at you, that will be Mo'ir Rachamim. That he could double arouse great mercy, Lamayla, for each individual. And that will be a blessing for him in all of his inyonim, that Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron looked at him. That's what the Ramban said.
Yeah.
So does anybody have a dogma of that they could mention? Hey,
Dollars.
what's with the dollars, no? The Rebbe stood for hours and hours every Sunday, and people filed by, and the Rebbe gave them a dollar. And what happened? The Rebbe looked at them, and they looked at the Rebbe. And those who had a big schus, they heard a few words. The Rebbe would say something to them very briefly, because the line had to keep moving. But it was a form of a yechida for every person that filed by. So what happened was the Rebbe looked at them, and they had the great schus for looking at the Rebbe. So what happened from that was that the Rebbe was Mo'er Rachem, and he gave a bracha. What did he do? He said bracha v'chatzlah. He gave a blessing to everybody, and the blessings worked. That's amazing. I could tell you a story, but if I tell you a story, then you're going to say to me, well, he tells all these stories, but he doesn't really get anywhere with the lesson. But I was there once when the Rebbe was in the Shnas Avelis after the Rebbe's. But for that whole year after the Rebbe gave out the dollars in his house. Yeah, and the Rebbe stood in his living room. There was a big curtain right behind him. He stood right near the curtain, and people filed by, came in the front door, a big line the whole time. They got the dollar from the Rebbe, and then they went out through the backyard and back out onto the street. That's the way it went. And so I heard, my son was me, it's a whole story what I can't go into now. And I went past the Rebbe, and I took the opportunity of ducking behind that curtain. Yeah, the Rebbe was standing like in front of the curtain, and he was going, and I sort of ducked in and waited behind the curtain walls. I wanted to see, how does it work, I mean, I've been many times by the Rebbe, but I just wanted to catch it. And I was there for about 7 minutes or 8 minutes, and in the end, Leibel Groner came over to me. I'm an old friend of Leibel Groner's. He came over to me and he says, "Oh my God, I can't let you stand here." He said, "You've got to move." He didn't come over and throw me out. He didn't come and say, "Hey, Gavin, get out of here." No, I can't have you here. He was nice, He was very nice, but he was very definite. He says, "Oh my God, I can't let you stand here. You've got to move." So I moved. But in the meantime, I saw several people come past the Rebbe. And I saw a couple, they brought the lady especially to another entrance, because the ladies had a separate line, but this time she wanted to be together with her husband. And they hadn't had children for 15 years. They'd been married 15 years and they hadn't had children. And they came to the Rebbe the year before, asked for a bracha for children. The Rebbe gave them a bracha. They had a baby daughter.
Huh?
Yeah, so they had come to thank the Rebbe. Yeah, for the blessing. And the Rebbe was just with the absolute pashtas. It was just amazing. Yeah, they came up to the Rebbe and they said, "The Rebbe remembers us from last year. We were married 15 years. We had a baby daughter." So you would think the Rebbe would say, "Yeah, wow, that is so great. That is amazing. That is tremendous. Baruch Hashem, Malta." The Rebbe just looked at him with absolute, calmness. And then he said, "Mazel tov, Mazel tov." And then he picked up a handful of dollars. The Rebbe, when I say handful, several dollars. And he gave them to the lady. And she, number 10, said, she sort of looked at, she couldn't figure as a tutor or $1, what several dollars. So the Rebbe said to her, "That is for the other children," in English, so he said, "that is for the further children that are going to be born." That's what the Rebbe said. It's just amazing. what a responsibility that is to take her to say that. And the woman, she just went into seventh heaven. And she just completely freaked out. And she just took off. And she just said, oh, and she couldn't believe her ears. The Rebbe said, this is for further children that are going to be born. And he turns to the husband and he says, what do you do? You know, what is your, what do you work at? Or what is your business or whatever? So he said he works in a big firm. He's in some sort of, high position. He mentioned the name of the firm. So the Rebbe said, you meet people in the office? So he said, yes. So the Rebbe picked up once again several dollars, gave to him, and he said that you should give around to all your colleagues or comrades or something in your work. You should give them out that they should give these for tzedakah, for charity. So he gives him. He's also he's got a handful of dollars. And the Rebbe said, Mazel Tov, you should have a lot of nachas, and we should hear many Basuras daily. And that was perfectly just. And then the Rebbe sort of made the sign that they should move on. And then he turned to the next person. So I'm standing there behind the curtain, and I could see this. I saw it happen. My eyes just, standing out on stalks. You would have thought that it was showed some, oh, wow, this is really great, Mazel Tov, the Rebbe just said, he said Mazel Tov, he said it very nicely, but it was all just, check, and it's all very, and he looked carefully at each one of them. There was this for the lady, it's for the children, she just took off, and the Rebbe says this is for, if your work to give around to your friends at work and everything like that. And then the Rebbe said, take So now you get some idea what the Rambam means. That if you go past Moshe Rabbeinu and he takes a look at you, or you go, and Aaron is the same thing, and you go past it, that's a bracha. Why? Because he will be Mo'er, Rachamim for you, and that will be just the fact you walk past. That will be a bracha of Hatzlacha, a call Amitztarek leIsha. So it's written in the Rambam. So if that's not a mokia to the Indian of a lot of the things that the Rebbe did, and a lot of the things that are hidden in the concept of Emes Rebbe, then I don't know what you could want better. But I see that you guys are all big Bali Moichin, you're all very in charge of yourselves. When I was standing there alongside the curtain, my eyes were just joking out of that. I was completely thunderstruck. And I saw a few other people that came after, so that was Bracha, Batzlacha, Bracha, and I'm looking at each one. Those eyes are taking in each one. Exactly what they are. Good. Beautiful. And then all of a sudden, Levi Burner come over and he said, so he can't stand it. So then I went out to the backyard and I met my son. He'd gone out ahead of me because I was standing there. He didn't know what happened. All of a sudden he sees I'm not there. He couldn't figure where I was. But I came out. Okay, so we now are required to understand what is this Indian of why is it that the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that all this happened in a Midbar, in the Midbar Sinai? And like we said, that the name of the whole parasha is Bemiidbar. But it indicates that there's something very special about a desert and about being in a desert before you come to Matan Torah. Because when you want here, we point out that Teshuvah says in Masechta Megillah that this parasha is always before Matan Torah, always. Well, now, both Ba'orah to the Kufar. There's some intent connection between the idea of a desert and then this idea of elevating the head. And the Ramban says, Ramban compares it, and he mentions the idea of an executioner. So, it's brought down in our Medrash, and the Rebbe brings it down several times in the Sichos. It's brought down that the reason that it says But all this happened in a midbar. And the idea of a midbar is like a forerunner to the giving of the Torah, is that the Torah was given in a place where nobody can stop you walking in. In other words, the midbar doesn't belong, or maybe nowadays it does, I don't know. Maybe, some crazy Arabs or something will try to fence it off or something. I know, but in the old days when originally, people were sort of living in their countries, a midbar was like a place where nobody had any particular wish to really be connected with it. Of a midbar wasn't a Reshus HaYachid. How do you call it Reshus HaYachid? It wasn't a private domain. And it wasn't a Reshus HaRabbim, it wasn't a... Now that means to say that there's no ownership. The Reshus HaYachid means that you are the balabos of that area. You are the owner, as it were. Reshus HaRabbim means that the whole area belongs to a public. It doesn't belong to any given person, but it's the ownership of a collective group of people, and that's called a Reshus HaRabbim. The midbar is not a Reshus HaRabbim either. According to certain halachas, it has the din of a karmelis. A karmelis is a din de rabbanan, but a get of itzor if you take something out for one Reshus HaRabbim. But that's another thing. However, the actual midbars are unowned, desolate, seemingly not particularly attractive place. So the Medrash says that the Eibusha gave the Torah in a midbar, Davkir, to teach you that the Torah is actually in an unowned place. And anybody who wants to come and learn the Torah and be a receiver of the Torah, he can do it. In other words, the Torah is not dependent on who you are. It's not dependent if you're a big, you come from big families or something like that. It's not dependent on your, your fame as a person or your great abilities. It all depends on you. It depends that if you want to come and receive the Torah and get involved in Torah, then you can do it. And therefore the Torah was given in this unknown place, in this desolate place, to show that the Torah is like it's like etiquette laying in a corner, according to one version there in the Medrash, and anybody can come along and chaf it. That doesn't mean to say that he can chaf it in a way that nobody else will be able to chaf it. It means it's public property, absolute. Everybody can come, and everybody can get it, and everybody can be a... Now that's, in other words, that's referring to something essential in the Torah itself, why the Torah was given in a midbar. That the actual Torah is not owned by anybody. Later, it was given only to the Yidden and not to everybody. But to a certain extent, there's no hagbolas, because even somebody, if he comes in the right way and according to halacha, even if he wasn't from Yidden, he can come and embrace the Torah and he can become a mekabelos Torah. Meaning that the Torah is beyond, in that respect, it's beyond all limitation. That's the milah of a midbar. A midbar is like an unlimited, and higher than all places. So, it's take a very great idea of why would it be davki in a midbar? Hashem could have found other ways to show us that if you really want to get into Torah, then you can. But there must be something kilo deeper also in this Quran. We'll soon say about that in a second. We'll soon talk about it. However, there's another aspect of a midbar, and that refers to each person himself. He's got to become a midbar in order to get to the Torah. You yourself have got to become a midbar. So what would you suggest? Are there any takers to suggest what does it mean you've got to become like a desert in your soul in order to get to the Torah? You got to be like
Be
a
open.
desert in yourself.
Be open.
Map,
Be open like your sister.
be open.
Like the
Yeah. Yeah, well, if you're closed, then you're certainly not going to be able to understand all that. In other words, you have to be open and ready to take messages. Yeah.
Thirsty.
Huh?
Thirsty.
Thirsty. Oh, that's a very good statement. The Midbar is a thirsty place, like what he mentioned at the beginning. So he said it teaches that you personally have got to be thirsty. You've got to be not satiated by what you learn, but always thirsty for more. Very good. I think that sums up. What I wanted to do was use the Chassidish term a bit more, but what was your name again?
Eitan.
Eitan. Yeah, what Eitan says sums it up quite nicely, and that is what the Chassidish concept of bittul. And bittul means self-nullification, you know, the putting of yourself like a midbar. You are like hefker. In other words, you're not a mafunak, you know, you're not spoiled. You know, well, this I can't, and this I can't, you know. And I have to, you know, adapt you this, if I don't have this, and I can't this. You're how do you call it? You're hefker, you're bottle, and you're ready, as it were, for anything. Then you can learn the Torah. But it's very interesting. Here's what you might call the Chabadske kretch, and that is that in two Gemaras, the Gemara says this, that if you make yourself like a midbar, then you get the Torah b'matona. Now let's say the Torah gives you, Hashem gives you personally the Torah b'matona. What would that imply? You know, as regards you personally. Let's say you wake up tomorrow morning and you got a notice on your door, Hashem has given you Torah b'matona. I mean, what would that imply?
not doing anything. Not doing anything.
Not Shanyim?
Not doing anything.
Not your doing.
Not doing anything.
Yeah, not doing anything. Hey, come on.
Matana.
Could you imagine such a thing? A Torah and a citizen not doing anything? What does it mean if somebody gives you a matana, then it's not according to what you did. It's what we call shalei ba'erev. It's not proportional. All of a sudden somebody walks up and gives you a matana. So it's put down in the Gemara that if you hadn't given him a certain nachas of some sort, and he hadn't been nice to him, he wouldn't give you a matana. He'd start to somebody else give him only somebody that's caused you a little bit of nachas for. But the matana that he gives you is usually not according to the amount of effort you put into the giving him a nachas for, except for rare situations. So matana indicates that you get something that you didn't really put in a proportionate effort to that. You did put in effort. I don't agree with you on that one. You didn't do anything.
That's what I meant.
What you meant. What you meant was it's loyal for
You didn't do anything to get it. Like
very good, wonderful. In that case, I withdraw my criticism, and it's a good answer. It's not a fiyera what your koyches are. And that's hinted at a famous Gemara in Masechta Megillah, that the Rebbe made that one of the 12 things that the kids say, and that is, it's written over there, that if somebody said, I worked really hard, but I didn't get anywhere. I struggled very hard, but I didn't get anywhere. What does the Gemara say about that?
don't believe it.
Don't believe it. Old time. And then if he says, but I did find, yeah, but I didn't work hard for it, also don't believe it. But if he says, I worked very hard and I found, well then you should believe it. So the lotion of the Gemara is, I worked very hard and I found. What's the lotion of found? Found that you don't find. If you work very hard, you understand where you get what you're aiming at. To find is like a matana, but even more. to find. You're just walking along and all of a sudden you find something. That's really not according to your effort either. It's just something like Mina Shabayim said to you, Hashgacha Prati. So that means that even though you put in a lot of hard work, what Hashem gives you is not according to what you put in. And however, He does demand that you work hard. And if He sees that you work hard, then He gives you Shaloi Lafi Erev B'Klam. That's the Lashon Yogati Motzosi. I worked very hard, and I got a Matzia. Yeah, I found. That's the whole concept of a person making himself a midbar. If you make yourself a midbar, then you work very hard. You struggle and you don't reckon with anything. You're like a person in a midbar, he doesn't have all the luxuries, but nonetheless you keep pressing ahead and you keep working. Then Hashem will give you the Torah b'matona. And it's based on a parasha, a few parashas away in Bemiidbar, a pasuk in Chukas, where it's written, Bemiidbar matana, that from the desert Hashem gave them a gift. Once again, from the desert they got the Torah. And then the Torah elevated them, and the Torah brings them up to the highest places, etc., etc. So that's a Gemara in Masechta Eruvin, and also in Masechta Nedarim. Now it's very interesting, the great Meforshim learn over there, what does it mean you make yourself like a midbar? So we just gave our Pirush with it. Over there in the Gemara, Rashi and the Ran and a couple other great Meforshim, they say, what does it mean that you make yourself like a midbar? So they say that you are ready to teach anybody who will ask you. So this is the Hedikot, the Chabadske Kvet. You are ready to teach anybody who will ask you. That means that you're a midbar. That he said, you're available anytime, any station. You're always there. If the other person should need you, you're always there. It's a privilege pshat. It's mamash amazing. And so you're not allowed to be a false modesty. You know what false modesty is? So somebody comes up and says, listen, could you maybe help me with a certain thing? And say, oh, me, I'm not this for that, I'm not that, so I'm not made for that, you have to look for somebody. You have to know that if he approaches you, then you've got to help him some way. You've got to put him on the path. If you don't know the whole depth of the matter, you start him off. And then at least you're referring to where you will get the whole depth. But you have to realize that the fact that he approached you, well, that's Hashgacha Prati is that you have to give him. And that's called a midbar. That's called being a desert. Yeah, therefore, I was for bringing once where the Rebbe said that if you learn Aleph, all you know in the world is one Aleph. That's what you know. He said, you're mechuyev to teach another person that you will, another yid, that you mean that you know he doesn't know Aleph, you got to teach him Aleph. And then if Hashem will help you learn Beis, and you know both Aleph and Beis, then you'll meet up with him again, and you'll teach him Aleph and Beis. But the very fact that you were taught one letter, that is a sign that you've got to give that further. You've got to give that to another yid that he doesn't have Aleph. So L'chara, you guys you learned it last Shabbos in Pirkei Avos, if I'm not mistaken. It's written there that afilo you learn from another person, afilo ois achas.
Wow.
Yechayev lin hoi bei kovi. No. Come on. And who was that? That was David Melech, yes? Yisrael Leil. David was the king of the whole Jewish people, and Achitophel wasn't such a hot line. I mean, Achitophel was a big, he knew a heck of a lot, but he didn't turn out so good. And nonetheless, he taught Torah no matter one shmig, one thing, one small thing, like, you know, the erech of one horse, and a certain Torah no matter it was noyeg boy covered. He showed his cover, even though he was the king, because he taught him one minimal little thing like one horse. So we learn from Torah Miller, and lo the kol chayma. Allah has come v'kama. If Torah Miller did that, then Allah has come v'kama. We have to teach somebody before being zeichet to learn something. And that's what the great Meforshim tell us, that if you learn something, you have to be open, you have to be a midbar. Anybody can come and demand of you that you share it with them. It's not yours. It is, but it isn't. It came from a mohim hefker. So that's the way you got to conduct yourself with the inner. You've got to be a midbar. Now a lot deeper than that is the Rebbe brings down in the Dvar Malchus of last week, the Meshchista Dvar Malchus, not the colored Dvar Malchus, the real Dvar Malchus. It's brought down that the Rebbe brings down over there that after we came, asked the question, a midbar, it's mamish a place with, it's mamish the most desolate and out of the way place where you can imagine. Nonetheless, the Eden, the Jewish people, 600,000, Hashem took them all the way out. He could have taken them from Mitzrayim to X capital city or something. He took them out into a midbar and he gave them the Torah. So what's this? There must be some. So the Rebbe says that indicates that if you approach the Torah the way we just described now, then what happens is that you get to the Eibusha and you reach levels in Torah which are beyond any limitation. And the pnimis of a desert is that it's beyond all limitation. If you talk about a Rishus HaYochim, a Rishus, it's got certain measurements. If you talk about a Rishus HaRabbim, it's more unlimited, and it can be a big long road or whatever, but it's a certain limited concept. But with Berega, what you say, a midbar, how do you call it, that's unknown. It has no limitation. That indicates a level in divinity and a level in Torah which is beyond all limitations and beyond, as it were, Kaviyachol, all abilities to say that it's owned. It's completely beyond ain't safe or amiti. But I mean, if you learn Torah the way we describe now, midbar, you get the midbar of Kedusha, you get the midbar of Elikus, and you are zeicha to such a level of Elikus which is beyond all limitation. In other words, where ain't safe, you've heard this expression, where ain't safe or amiti, where Atzmi v'oer HaSeiv call what you like, of Hashem is beyond all limitation. And you come to a Indian in Torah where you study Torah, how it's completely beyond limitation. That's the Indian. You might say, me, how am I going to make that? I'm not sure it's the high in Yon. Oh yes you are. If you are a midbar, and you act like a midbar, and you're given away, and you realize that it was given, because it's just laying there for you to come and get it. All you got to do is want to get it. Then, and you're ready, that anybody can come and literally put their nose into your affairs and learn from you. If you're like that, then you get the Torah without limitations. Or ain't safe or a meeting. And that's the Indian from Pneumius Torah. That's the Indian from Siddur. The truth Siddur was teaches you Mesiras Nefesh. And we don't know, we talk about Mesiras Nefesh, but we don't really have any musik of Yidden, that were in certain situations during history, what was really, the way they related to Yiddishkeit, and particularly the Chavatsky Yidden in Russia, in just the last generation. I mean, people are right close to us. These are people, we know their families, and so on. We know who they are. Yeah? These are people that we know who they are. We know their families, and we know people that are descended from. Just right now, And these are people that mamish, gave away all their comforts in their lives, and they were, how do you call it, damaged their whole lives, and put themselves into risk the whole time. They had to keep their head straight. But from that we see that if you act in a way which is Bemiidbar, then you gain the Torah also in such a way, and that's what I brought down at the beginning of the class, the Pirush, Kain Bakoidish, as a secret of when I reached the holy place, halavai, that I should have the same, would that I should have the same Mesiras Nefesh, and the same longing that I had when I was in the Midbar. So in that case we see that the hidden in this teaching of the Midbar is this whole concept both of the situation of the Torah itself and the personal relationship of the person with Torah, and the level of divinity and the level of Torah that he can bring down for himself, and does bring down through the inner Midbar. That all builds up this picture why we have to be told the whole inner Midbar before we receive the Torah. And now we'll understand why it says Shiur es Reish Kol B'nai Yisrael, that he wants to count Yidden, he says to lift up their head. And the Ramban, as we say, uses a very strange expression. And he said, this is what they used to say to the executioner, take up his head. We thought, what sort of a statement? What is the Ramban hinting at with that? What does he want with that? Elamai, you've got to literally, if you want to be approachable, and you want to be, like we said before, a midbar, then you should be able to take that, the highest in Yonim, in Torah. You got to literally take off your head. You got to literally be prepared to take off your own head. So I was thought to myself, if I take off my head, what's going to be? I'm not going to be, nothing's going to be left. So the answer is that the Alter Rebbe has got right at the beginning of this week's parashas. The Alter Rebbe's got a famous maamar which begins with this Shiur es Reish. First of all, we Yidav Hashem, and then Shiur es Reish. And he talks about what this whole meaning of elevating the head when we're counting. Well, why do we use the expression elevating the head? So the Alter Rebbe says very briefly, he said, what is the head? He said the head is the koiches which Hashem has given to us in a form of what we call revealed power, like our reasoning, chokhmah, bina, das, and the 7 midas that come out of the brain. They all were with a seder, and you understand, and then you get into bina, deeper and more profound understanding. Then you bring they call midas, and all that comes from the head. And those midas, they promote in a person what's called a will, a ratzon. And therefore it's brought down that, for example, the word ahavor is from a Lashon Kodesh root which is ovo. And ovo means will, ovo means to want. Ahavor is like what I really want. And the same it is with all the midas. But that's a will which was produced by your sefer. Normally, will is a very sort of powerful thing, but it can be guided and, as it were, somewhat promoted by your sefer. The truth is, it's not really made by the sefer. That's another whole discussion, it says. But we see there are certain wills that come through and are limited by the sefer. However, the real aspect of will is beyond sefer. That's what we call the gulgelas, what he calls it, the bone that surrounds the head. That's indicatory that there's a much higher will by you. And that comes mitzad the etzem haneshama, and the etzem haneshama doesn't really enter the body. It's sort of, and that's a head to your head. That's how he calls an extra high level over your head. And that's called the etzem haneshama, or chai yechida, or yechida. It's got different names, but the rotzen there is a simple rotzen, and a rotzen which is beyond reasoning altogether. It has nothing to do with reasoning, and it's there by a Yidden all the time, and that wants and is united with Hashem, absolutely. Like we say on Sukkot in the what do you call it, in the Rishanas, Chavuka v'davuka bo. the neshama is always cleaving to and completely embraced in you. That's the etzema neshama l'maylam. That's the rotzen, what's called the simple rotzen, or the rotzen portion of a person, a yid for eloquent. So us reish is your reasoning and the will which comes from your reasoning. You've got to elevate that will and link it into the will which is beyond reasoning altogether. Because if you go according to the will which is according to reasoning, so one day you'll wake up in the morning and you say, oh, but my reason's not working good today. I said, since my reason's not working good today, I have a schwache will. I said, my will is also a little bit schwache. The rotzen is a bit proportionate to the will. But if you say, no, I've elevated my rosh, I've elevated my will, which is limited somewhat by seichel, I've elevated that into the will which is beyond seichel altogether, and I've caused them to join together. I have a will which is beyond this. And when I wake up in the morning, I say, I don't really sort of feel so much today. Comes along the fact that you're linked up to the rotzen, beyond the kol, very good. So who is reish? And it says, listen, man, I'm sorry you're not in a good mood, but we're going to get some stuff. We're going to make sure it's done. Because we are rotzen beyond reason. We don't know anything about reason. We are linked up with Hashem. And that's the inner of elevating your head. And that's what the Ramban hints, that you got to, as it were, take your head off. You got to, as it were, execute yourself and go off into a higher level altogether, and then you function completely different. And that's what the Gemara says. A famous Gemara, also brought down in several places in Shas, that is also based on parashas Chukas. But the Gemara says that if you want to really learn Torah, then what's the Eiter? You have to kill yourself for the sake of the Torah. Eina Torah niknis ela lamisha meinis es atzmei aleya. The Torah is only purchased by somebody who kills himself. If you kill yourself, then you're not going to learn Torah. Also, you're not allowed to kill yourself. What does that mean? You've got, as it were, move up into a higher rotzen, a higher will. And you've got to be, how do you call it, linked to the higher will. That's elevating the head. You've got to lift up the head, and that's necessary before Matan Torah. And if you do that, that's the in. And by the way, what you're learning about Hakdomas Naisila Nishma, the Eden said Naisila before Nishma, all of what I just said is hidden in that. But we can't go into too many things all at one go. And that is the soul and the secret of the Alter Rebbe's teaching. But that mind that he brings Su'u'es, right? He goes into this whole of linking the two worlds together and elevating your will into the world beyond limitation. That's, as it were, the Yesod of Lubavitch. In other words, even though Lubavitch is called Chokmah Bina V'Das, it's really crazy. It's not Chokmah. It's really Milo again. Su'u'es raised into the Rotzen, Milo Mitam V'Das. I, him, came. Why did the Alter Rebbe call it Chabad? He should have called it Li Gvu or something. He should have called it Rotzen L'mayla Mitam V'Das. Who knows? Yeah, why did you call it Chabad? So you think I can answer all the questions? I have to answer all the questions. So we'll leave that for another time. Why did the why did the Alter Rebbe call it Chabad? Even though he didn't mean that you should remain only with Chabad. But that we'll talk about Be'ez Hashem on another time. In the meantime, everybody should have a good Nachona on parashas Bemiidbar, for Kabbalah Satira, the Simcha V'Pnimius, all this is a Hachona to learn Torah from Melech HaMashiach, take it miyad, and only if you go up into a higher realm of the will, and you become a little bit, to use the expression, crazy, and you're bound up in the God's and Shalamayla Mihadas, then you can very willingly say, we want Mashiach.
Now. Yeah?
Have a
Yeah.
good day, my guys.